Thank you for joining and welcome to our webinar today. My name is Simona Barbu and I will be moderating the event. I'm a policy officer with FEANTSA, and together with my colleague Sergio, we organized today's webinar. So thank you for joining. Before I do a brief introduction of the webinar, I would just like to mention a few technicalities. I know everyone must be used by now with using Zoom, but please be aware that we are recording and we are in a presentation mode webinar. So we would like to hear from you. Therefore, we would like to ask you to use the Q&A section and the chat for writing in any questions you may have or sharing with us where you are joining from and other details about your work. We would very much like to know who is in the room with us today. We will also be together for 2 hours today, so the event will finish at 12 o'clock. We have divided the webinar into sessions, and we will take a very short break after the first session, during which I would like to ask you all not to sign out, but to just take 5 minutes to go grab a coffee or take a break from the screen and then join back in because we will continue with a second session. That being said, on the technical part, very briefly to introduce the context in which we are meeting today, the webinar is taking place within the framework of PRODEC, which is the FEANTSA project focusing on mobile EU citizens experiencing homelessness. And the project is in its third phase. With your permission, I will now share my screen and show you the poster we prepared for today. I hope you can see it. So our project is supported with funding from EPIM, the European Programme for Integration and Migration, and it is where FEANTSA is developing our work on destitution among people who exercise their right to free movement. Within this work that we've been extensively implementing in the past years together with our members, we noticed that there are some groups who are facing specific challenges within the mobile EU citizens across Europe, and some groups who face specific vulnerabilities, which is why today we organize this session to address these issues, specifically the intersectionality among mobile EU citizens. So we will start by looking at two specific issues today. We will look at gender issues and the Roma history and culture. And like I said, we have 2 sessions for each of the topics, but we will also like to hear from you if there are other issues that you are facing in your work and that you would like to be addressed in the future. And also just a kind reminder that tomorrow we have a session which is looking at EU funding for mobile EU citizens in homelessness. So if you didn't register yet, we invite you to do so. So without further delay from my side, I will now like to go into the first session and introduce the 3 speakers that we have for that session. We will begin with our very own colleague from the FEANTSA Secretariat, Dalma Fabian, who is a policy officer coordinating FEANTSA's work on women and children's homelessness. And Dalma will give us an overview on women's homelessness and tell us a bit more about how services can adapt to be more gender inclusive. And after Dalma will set the scene for us, we will hear from 2 projects, 2 organizations that have developed services with a focus on women. We will hear from Olivia Gayraud, which is the head of service at Armée, Salvation Army in France. And second, we will hear from Camila Valdés, who is a team leader at Crossroads in Sweden. Thank you so much. And Dalma, I will pass it on to you.
Thank you, Simona, and good morning, everyone. I will share my screen. Just a second. Okay. Here. Okay. So good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you for the product partnership for including women and gender focus in their work program. And I'm glad to be here. And as Simona said, I will sort of set the scene for the presentations below. And sorry, this is the last slide I just noticed. Yeah, I think this is the first one. So I thought maybe I would.
Sorry,
yes,
we can see the last slide still, I think, and it's not full mode.
Okay, so
No,
already technical difficulty. What can I do? Is this still the last slide you see?
Yes, it's the in summary slide. Maybe you can stop sharing and try sharing again.
Sorry about this.
Okay, yes, now it's the first slide.
Now it's the first slide, but it's not in full mode, is it?
No.
Okay, why is it not? Okay.
As long as you can change the slides, I think that's fine, right?
It is fine. Okay, sorry about this. I'm doing this not for the first time, but I don't know what happened. Yes, so the idea was that I start maybe by describing how we have started our work on women's homelessness, and it was included as a thematic area in FEANTSA's work because of a strong push from our membership to include women's homelessness in FEANTSA's work, because at the time our members were mostly service providers in Europe, and they recognized that women were not accessing their services, or they were disengaging from services, they were not doing well, and they wanted to improve their work. At the same time, research which overwhelmingly focused on men's experience of homelessness started to emerge on women's homelessness. The WEN network has been launched, and still there's a lot of gaps in evidence on women's homelessness, and it continues to be under-researched, but there was growing evidence and also call among the researchers to do more research on women's homelessness. And since we work at EU level, there were also advocacy opportunities at the EU level in making progress on women's rights and ensuring that women experiencing homelessness are also included in European strategies, and that also that funding from these women's rights work stream also include the calls for proposals also include women who experience homelessness as a target group of EU-funded projects. So these are the important developments that have pushed FEANTSA to work on women, and actually are still the pillars of our work on women's homelessness. We started to work on with some EU funded projects, and we have organized transnational exchanges on women's homelessness and developed jointly training materials and other resources to help our members. And that led to the creation of FEANTSA Women, which you might see on the screen, if you see it, hopefully, which is a community of practice where we share best practices and organize exchanges. And also the idea is like jointly develop a knowledge base on women's homelessness. We have, yes, I'm not going to go into details of the project. You can find more information on the FEANTSA website on the project. So, okay, yeah. What we realized that there was a problem that little attention was given to homeless women, and they were invisible in the data. There were a number of reasons for this invisibility. One is that homelessness historically has been perceived as a domain of single men. Measurement techniques overlook women. They focus on environments that are women avoid, male-dominated services. So we know that women are more likely to rely on informal arrangements, staying with family and friends. And even when they do sleep rough, they are not counted or not seen because they are hiding or concealing their gender, or moving all night or taking the bus all night for their physical safety. So the definitions and the enumeration overlooks women and don't necessarily capture all the living situations that they can be found. And the third reason for the invisibility is that women delay contact or avoid contact with services. It also explains the hiddenness of women's homelessness. So what is very important is that we continue to push for recognition of women's homelessness as an issue and to keep it on the agenda. They are not a subgroup of homeless population, because if you broaden the definition and include, take into account the hidden forms of homelessness and what I already mentioned, the other arrangements women are more likely to use, and you include family homelessness, which is very often single mothers with children, then you see that the figures are bigger and women are more present. But it's very important to continue the advocacy for more recognition. It's important to stress that women homelessness is rooted in structural inequalities and gender-based violence, which is the biggest driver of women's homelessness and a major, nearly universal among women. It's a major cause and consequence of women's homelessness, and also the biggest difference between men's and women's homelessness. But of course, there are also the structural factors, the gendered experience of poverty, the precarious financial and housing situations, and other system failures that lead to homelessness. We also have to recognize that women homelessness is not a homogeneous group, it's a diverse group. Women are Roma, older women, women with children, they belong, is women with the disability, living with the disability. So they often also not belong to one group. They face multiple and intersecting structural inequalities and discrimination. So that's also the theme of the webinar today. So what is also very strong and one of the biggest barrier for women to accessing services is the shame and stigma. It's in the case of women, it's multiple stigma, and because of the societal expectations of a women. And it's very much linked to why women are avoiding services and don't avoid seeking help and accommodation. because often in their service, they feel stigmatized. They also lack safety. They also feel that they lack control, and services. They find services difficult and unhelpful, and they also feel that they produce feelings of powerlessness and infantilization. So that's their service experience. So what are the effective responses look like? It's clear that there's a gender dimension to women's homelessness, and the gender lens should be applied. Also, human rights-based approach, advocating based on women's rights to housing, breaking the cycle of gender-based violence and women's homelessness is key to prevent and end homelessness, and their housing is a key for women's safety and protection from gender-based violence, and it's also empowering women. Gendered homelessness strategy that understand and invest in women. Policy responses should be gender informed and intersectional, and also shaped by the women experience themselves. So peer-led approaches, and also very important that collaboration across sectors. Disconnected systems also leave women without support, and it's an additional challenge to navigate when already one is experiencing complex trauma, and this can also leave women without support. And we need gender and trauma-based, trauma-informed homelessness services. I don't have now time, I guess, to go into detail on how do they look, but they certainly, what is very important is the emotional and physical safety, a service that understands the experience of gender-based violence, and also the effect of trauma that is based on quality relationships and based on trust. And like I said, the most effective response is creating safety by providing women only services by women and for women, and also for a service that values women's voice and listens to them. So women will come to services that understands and listens to them, and where workers are caring and are providing support in an accessible and flexible and non-judgmental way. Okay, so in summary, I think the three important points linking back to the beginning of the presentation is that to ensure that women's homelessness is recognized in data collection, in definitions, in advocacy, but also at all levels in policy and in practice. It's very important, and very important to continue to push for that, because there are always, as we know, backlashes in women's rights. So it's a constant push in our advocacy work. It's very important to ensure that we have an understanding of the needs, and we build a strong evidence base. I mentioned that huge progress has been made in this area, and we have a lot of evidence now, but we need more, and we need more peer-led research that listens to women experience and shape the policies and practice accordingly. And also, of course, to use this evidence to change and transform services and policies, again, at all levels. Like I said, women homelessness is not an additional support need. It's something that the gender aspects had to be considered in all aspects of the service design and delivery. And we need to use this, the evidence we have to push for change and transform services so that they respond better to the needs of women. Yes, and yes, I mentioned that we launched the FEANTSA Women a year ago, and it's a community of practice. So please feel free to join. Just send me an email or to Simone and Sergio, and yeah, happy to include you in the community of practice. Thank you.
Thank you, Dalma, for that overview and for making the link with policies. And also, like Dalma said, feel free to get in touch if you want to find out more about FEANTSA Women. It's something that Dalma is developing, and I think it would be great to see the issue of mobile EU citizens who are women as well reflected in the network. So we remain available for that. We will move now straight to hearing from people who develop services for women. And like I mentioned in the beginning, we will go to France. And Olivia, if you are ready, please, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. So I'm Olivia Gayraud, the head of service of Cité des Dames. I will present the service of Cité des Dames. So the Cité des Dames is the service of the Foundation Armée, Salut, the team Armée. We are based in Paris. The problem of homelessness in Paris is very high. We know that there are 5 homeless, 2 are women. And the mission seems to open emergency program.
Really sorry, Olivia. Your sound is not very clear. We cannot really hear what you're saying. I don't know if you have any way of moving closer to the microphone.
Can you hear me?
Can you try saying something again?
Can you hear me now?
A little bit better, but still not very clear. We're sorry for that.
I put the maximum.
Yes, I don't know if it's the sound or maybe the internet connection. Sorry.
I sent somebody to control me. But it can take. Do you want to do something else?
Maybe we can go to Camila if you want to have a minute to look into that.
Can you hear me now?
It's still not very clear, sorry.
J'entends pas du tout.
Mais c'est pas clair. Pas c'est l'internet.
Can you try again now?
If we speak from here, is it better if we're like in the center of the room? In the same...
Yes.
It's better?
I'm not sure who is talking now, but the sound is much clearer. Yes. Okay, yeah.
Parce que vous pouvez venir là et d'avoir...
Sorry for that, everyone. Thank you for your patience.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Better?
much better. Thank you. Yes.
Sorry for that. So I can start again.
Yes.
So I will present today the service of Cité des Dames, which is a unit of the Foundation Service of Armée. So the unit has been set up late in 2018 The foundation was usually opening a program during winter for women, specific program for women. But as in Paris, there were more and more women on the street, homeless, they decided to open a permanent unit, so the Cité des Dames, which is a day center and also a shelter for 50 women at night. So it was an opportunity to give unconditional access to homeless women. We have an average of 800 different women coming during the daytime. And last year we were able to welcome 50 women per day, so more than 300 different women during the year. The women we are welcoming at Cité des Dames, they are all adults, isolated, so they have no children, and they can be pregnant. And they are coming from, their majority are foreign origin, more than 85%, but majority are coming from sub-Saharan Africa. We have only a few women coming from Europe, and I think the reason is because we don't have any possibility to receive families, and majority of people homeless from Europe are families. I know that in Paris, every night, 300 family members are on the street with no solution at all. So the need is very high for families in Paris as well. We have in Paris, we have 5 specific units, shelter for women. But it seems that it's not enough, because every day we have to refuse because we are full. We have a capacity of 50, but it's not enough. Majority of women who are coming to Cité des Dames are violence survivors. They fled their country because of war, because of domestic violence. Because of sexual violence. Majority also face violence during their migratory trajectory, and also they face violence on the street in France. What I discovered when I started my position at the foundation is that many women they didn't spend a lot of time on the streets. They found any solution. So sometimes it's a friend or family, sometimes it's families, sometimes it's a job they found even in their country to be able to stay somewhere in Paris in order to do some work at home. But more and more we have women who are doing transactional sex in exchange of shelter or place to stay. This is, I think, the big reality. Even if they are not on the street, they are in a very dangerous situation somewhere in some home that it's a big issue today, because nobody else are talking a lot about this. And also often we said, because we meet women who have been raped while they were welcome in some house, and don't want to do anything, because they said, okay, but I had no choice. It was the reality, and so now, I mean, this is the big reality of homeless women today. I think it's very, very important to open discussion about this. What else? So the Cité des Dames also What is very interesting here, we have a multidisciplinary team. So we have social worker, we have one midwife and one psychologist. So each woman who are coming, we propose an initial assessment to understand, to know about their situation, their condition, and also what is their own project. And we worked in collaboration with different partners, NGO, and also hospital, because many of the women have medical problems, acute or more chronic disease. And we have psychologists who can start psychotherapy for women who have PTSD or big trauma, and after we try to refer those people who have very bad condition to the hospital. The difficulty we are facing today is the lack of accommodation. We are only a shelter. That means that we have the space for 24 women. For beds, who will be able to sleep on the bed, but the other one will be on sofa. So the condition is precarious, as we are only an emergency shelter. And after to be able to get longer term accommodation, it's more and more difficult and more and more long. So this is our big difficulty, because initially we were expecting to keep women at night around 10 days in order to do evaluation, to do the first administrative support. But after, they are staying longer and longer, more they are sick, more they are visible, more they stay longer. This is the reality. And we have around 20% of pregnant women. Sometimes they go to deliver while they don't have any accommodation after, and they won't be able to come back to CPDM. So this is our reality in Paris. There are so many women homeless who have no choice to find solution, and sometimes those solutions, while we are seeking to go somewhere, they put themselves in danger. Maybe after we'll be able to answer a question. Yes, that's it for me.
Thanks so much, Olivia. We will indeed have time for questions. Just a brief note, I see in the chat that there are some comments that there was still a problem with the volume, but for me, at least, it was quite clear, maybe to everyone who still has problems with the sound. Please turn up the volume on your devices. Thank you, and sorry for these troubles. We are still struggling even after a long time of doing things online. But thank you for the introduction to your services, Olivia. And now I think we will go to Camila. If you are with us, please take the floor and tell us about your work at Crossroads.
Thank you so much, Simona, and thank you everyone present listening to us. My name is Camila Valdés. I work as Ombud and team leader at Crossroads, and I work especially in our women's section. I don't know if you're all familiar with Crossroads, but Crossroads is a center for support in Stockholm who offers support for European migrants, European citizens, as well as third country nationals with a residency permit in another European country. To make people understand how our day-to-day is I always like to talk about Hannah Arendt when she referred to the Jewish diaspora after the Second World War, saying that human rights rely on the principle of one's humanity. Thus, even then and now, a person's citizenship is sometimes the one that grants them rights or not. And we work with people that are outside the system, and our day-to-day work is to try to get them into the system. And the main road for that in Sweden is through work integration, through work that gives you the Swedish social number, that gives you access to schooling, to education, to healthcare, housing, etc. So human rights are indivisible, which means that it's impossible to take away one of them without risking to increase the vulnerability. We also work with a really intersectional look when we meet our participants. They're all vulnerable, but some backpacks are quite heavier than others, and we have to be aware of this. And I have actually a little PowerPoint. I forgot about it while I was talking. Let me see if I do it like this. Do you see it?
Yes.
Right.
See it.
According to our methodology, no one is able to go out and explore the society, to look for a job, to take care of itself if the basic need is not fulfilled. So therefore, we created a women's department because we realized that our participants, we call them participants, are mostly men, and we were wondering where are the women, because we see them outside every day. How come they do not visit the center? Because there should be more of them. So we really put some effort in empowering the women's section. It's open between 8:30 to 12 every day, and the women have access to shower, laundry, advice, and support. It was really important for us to create relations with these women, get to know them. And sometimes when you're a social worker, you tend to want to help somebody so much. And we learned that first step is actually to be silent and just listen, because we need to improve and create the department regarding to their actually expressed opinions. And doing that, we actually realized that a lot of women have serious health issues. Pain has been sometimes part of their day-to-day life. A lot of them lacked a lot of knowledge about sexual health, sexual rights and reproductive rights. They had little or no knowledge of their own body, which means that the opportunity to decide over your own body, over your autonomy, has been quite far away. This led us to collaborate with the Red Cross from Sweden, Doctors in the World, which are fantastic volunteers that visit our centers twice a week. Why is this important? Because healthcare is a human right here in Sweden as well. But if you want to have it, if you don't have the Swedish social number, you have to pay full price, which is sometimes an impossibility, or most often an impossibility for the women that we meet. Also, if you lack reading and writing skills, it's impossible for us to give them a map and tell them, here is the nearest emergency, good luck. And as like the previous speaker was saying as well, there is a lot of, there's a lack of confidence in the social services, in authorities in general. So what we did is that we actually brought healthcare to them. And as we are focused on women, we actually saw that a lot of the issues that the women had were actually about sexual health and reproductive rights. So we actually had the pleasure to have 2 midwives visiting the centers once a week. One was from the region of Stockholm, and the other one is from Doctors of the World. We also had colleagues, Ombud that we call, who were Romanian speaking, because a lot of our participants are Roma women from Romania. And we also know that it's not enough to just have a translator over the phone. You need to have the trust, you need to have the relations, and you also need to talk in a language that is understandable for the person in front of you. You have to understand the person's background and adapt the language so she can understand what the doctor is actually telling her. And the close contact with the women's care and the possibility of our Romanian speaking colleagues have had a really positive effect on women's attitude to conversations about reproductive rights and sexual health. And it has meant an increased autonomy and the possibility of continuing to work and integrate in Swedish society. So considering that a lot of Crossroads female participants lack reading and writing language, we created methods to increase the possibility to acquire information. And we started literacy courses twice a week that was adapted to each person. In the beginning, it was quite shameful. Not many of them wanted to participate, but eventually we just left the room open and a lot of women started to knock on the door and finally found themselves sitting in a classroom for the first time in their life, for many of them. They also showed a very great interest in digital tools. So we actually combine literacy courses with digitalization because we noticed that even though many of them had smartphones or tablets, they still had a great dependency on others. And we think that all of us should have the right to get information first, to create our own opinion, and to not have everything filtered through the eyes or opinions of others. We actually realized that we live in Sweden, that is a quite modern and technologically advanced society. And even just to make an appointment with the doctors or to see when the bus is going to stop by or just to get a map, you need to have basic digital skills. So we have been really, really emphasizing on that. And the lead word in our organization is empowerment. Many times human rights have been taken for granted. And for us, one of the most important rights is to be seen, is to be heard, is to be treated as a human being. The invisibility of an individual and its own unique story is one of the reasons for continued and increased exclusion and vulnerability. Our constant goal is to work on not only giving the women their voice, but actually make society ready to listen, because a lot of them have been talking for a very long time, but we have been really bad at listening to the needs of each one of them. We have continued to work with openness and trust. Here on my PowerPoint, I have a little quote from one of the women who actually attended the literacy course. And it's really nice because when she came in, she couldn't even write her own name. And after a while, she could write her name, her mom's name, and her children's name. And for her, it was so important because she usually sends money to her family. She sleeps outside, she's homeless because she needs to save every penny to send home. And now she was able to go to the bank by herself to do that transaction. And she felt so proud of herself. We did a survey last year, And I'm very happy to hear that one of the questions that actually got the best positive outcome was the fact that I feel safe when I visit Crossroads. And that was especially true for the female participants. And sometimes we struggle because we think that, is this what we're doing? Is this enough? But it is sometimes. Some years ago, we met a woman from Romania. She's Roma. She was homeless. She had never been to school. She had never had a work. She started to participate in the literacy courses. She was part of the work integration programs. And today she's actually working at Hilton, cleaning, and it's a formal job. It's her first contract. And the best thing of it is that she did not have to assimilate. She did not have to give up her own identity as a Roma woman to work in Stockholm. And that is all for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Camila. Indeed, great work. And it's also interesting to hear you reflect on the challenges that being faced as a EU citizen in another country. We at FEANTSA, like I said in the introduction, we have been following this, and we know that in Sweden there are so many difficulties with getting a work contract and getting registered, which is why we also continue to follow the EU legislation and promote the rights of people. And in our work, we advocate for making free movement available and fair for all. So it's really, we're really grateful to hear about your work today. We are just on time for the questions and answers. And I see we have a hand raised. It is from Bianca Krista. I know she's joining us from Norway. Bianca, I'm going to allow you to talk. If you can try to do that now. Can you unmute yourself and feel free? Hello.
Thank you for allowing me to talk.
Of course, and anyone else, please feel free to let us know if you want to do that. Go ahead, Bianca.
I have two practical questions for Camila. The first one, I'm wondering, how do you manage to divide between the genders, since when you have, like, for example, doctors over there, which are they only consulting women, or are they consulting men too, but having like an increased focus on women? And the second one, I was wondering about the literacy courses. Were you, for example, providing them with some incentives for participating? Because this is often one of the reasons for which they are not interested in spending the time in these kinds of activities here in Oslo, for example, because they are missing valuable time in which they could be out on the street begging and providing, getting money to provide the family back home.
Thank you, Bianca, for your questions. So first of all, how we managed to separate the two is that we are lucky to have a really big center. So one section has an own entrance, which is the women's department. And there we have a classroom, a living room, counseling room, and we have access to shower and washing laundry. Also next door, we have a gynecology room available that no men actually knows exist unless their spouse or partner have informed them, because you can only access it from the women's department. So the midwives are mainly there for the women, but if a woman wants to have like counseling conversation between her and the husband, she's willing to do so. The doctors from Doctors in the World and the Red Cross are there for everyone. Our staff speaks almost 5-6 languages, so we try to have one translator for each participant. And when we have female participants visiting the doctor, we make sure that we have a female colleague that she trusts. And How to incentivize them to the literacy course, it has been one of the biggest struggles. Actually, we never really realized it, but we always help them with their smartphones. Like, can you please help me to open my TikTok account or Snapchat or Facebook or WhatsApp, because I need to talk to my children. When we started saying, you know what, I really do not have the time to help you with this every time, but if you just go next door to my colleague, she has this literacy course and she can help you to understand social media. So we connected actually social media with literacy. And when they realized that what they learned could profit like immediately, that's how we actually got them to stay. Thank you.
Thank you, Camila. We have a couple of hands raised, but before I give the floor to people in the audience, just have 1 minute of patience, please, because I would also like to use the same questions raised by Bianca and hear from Olivia. Olivia, could you tell us how do you face this kind of challenges in your place? Do you see that there is a need for incentives to bring women in, and do you face any digitalization challenges as well, because this is another big thing happening after the pandemic especially? Can you tell us a bit about that?
Majority of the women we are welcoming at Cité des Dames, they have low papers, so they can't work, but after a few days they are with us. There are two solutions. So some they are trying to find a voluntary work, and some they try to find job or to work somewhere to get some money. So this is yes, of course, everybody needs money. So we help them with ticket to take bus and subway to be able to go to their appointments, medical appointments, administrative appointments. But after there are some needs that we can't provide. We give food. We give. They are able to receive hygiene kits, clothes. You can wash their clothes. We give hot food at night, snacks during the day, but we know that it's impossible to stay without money. So majority we try to find work, but we try also to discuss with them to avoid that they will face exploitation. Because if you don't have any contract, they will continue to face exploitation. So this is what we do every day with the women. But that's true that as soon as you get a kind of home, you get people who take care of you. We are here. All the team is very present to help them every day, to listen to them, and we have different activities for them. Like dance, aesthetic activity, anything that help them to be stronger. So I know that the problem will steal the money.
Thank you for sharing that. We have Annika in the audience. Annika, I have allowed the possibility for you to intervene now. If you unmute yourself, please.
Hello, my name is Annika Apfel. I'm a social worker at homeless shelter in Amsterdam for European homeless people or people from the European Union. My question is about people beyond the gender binary. So how do you deal with trans women, people who identify as non-binary, and maybe also other people from the LGBT community? I think I hear often that they also need a safer space where they can, where they don't encounter so much discrimination. So I was wondering if you also have special policies for that, for the LGBT group. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question. Camila or Olivia, feel free. And also I would add to that, there is another question in the chat. Maybe you can address it at the same time about funding.
At CTDM, we can accept LGBT groups. So we have some we have some experience. So after experience, we get more confident to receive these groups. We put in place a different way to discuss with other women, because it's important that also to consider that we have people that they don't know at all about it. They have some idea, wrong idea. So as soon as we receive somebody we are from LGBT groups, we worked the team to put the person in good condition, that they feel comfortable in the group, and if possible, we open discussion with the other women.
And thank you for the question. It's actually a really good question. It's something that we have been struggling with in our center. We try to do the little things. For example, when we register a person for the first time, we ask for gender, and we have 3 options. It's female, male, or no binary. Immediately when we invite a person to our center, we go through some of our rules, and where we emphasize on equal treatment, no matter ethnicity, religion, gender, or sexual preference. We try to talk about human rights and involve also the LGBTQ community's rights in that discussion. I think during my 2.5 years, I only encountered 1 trans woman. And for us, it was the only requirement we had is that she identified as a woman, and that was enough for us. And we actually helped her to get access to her treatment. So we try to be very inclusive, having rainbow flags a little bit everywhere, but it's tough because it's a lot of people that we work with have very strong patriarch traditions, but you have to talk about things all the time. And regarding our fundings, we are part of our IOP. So we get some of our fundings through Stockholm City. And also Stockholm Stadsmission is actually one of the first organizations in Sweden that created the second-hand store. So a lot of the things that are sold in the second-hand, those monies are reinvested in the organizations, and also a lot of private donations.
And Camila, if you would like, there's also a question specifically on funding and financing the literacy classes. Also, the question is about who is teaching, who are the professionals, and if you have enough resources about this.
The fundings for the course of materials, we had it from our own organization. Sometimes we have some spare budgets, and we talk about it, and then we discuss where these money should be invested. Last year it was in literacy material. This year it has been to help our participants to pay for medicine. Once they have visited the doctors, they get a recipe, and then we can help them to fund the medicines. Both of our colleagues that held these 2 literacy courses have done courses in how to teach people who lack reading and language. And one of them is actually a actress, so she combined literacy with arts, for example. Thank you. I hope that was the answer to your question.
Thank you so much. I think that those were Well, there are questions coming in still, but we will have more time at the end after the second session. I will now propose to take the short coffee break for 5 minutes. Please don't sign out, don't go anywhere, because we will be back with the next two speakers, and we will discuss about Roma history and culture, and hear also from a Roma organization in the UK. So please, everyone, be back at 11:10. That is in 5 minutes. Thank you. So we are back. It's 10:10, and happy to see that people are still with us. Thank you again for your interest in our session today. Our second session has as objective to provide some knowledge about the history and culture of Roma. And we will try to identify some tools on how to better support mobile EU citizens with Roma background who experience homelessness. After the two presentations, we will again have time for questions. So please prepare your questions and send them to us, or raise your hand as some of the colleagues did earlier, and we can allow you to intervene directly. So that being said, for our second sessions, we will begin with Marina, who will give us an overview on a historical framework and experiences of homelessness or destitution among Roma who exercise their right to free movement. Marina is a feminist gender equality professional. She works with the organization FEANTSA in Brussels, and she also specialized in Romani gender research. She works with us as an independent consultant, and she has been kind enough to accept our invitation to prepare some training modules about Roma history and culture, which will be finalized in the coming weeks, and we will make available the material for everyone. And after Marina's introduction, we will hear from Mihai, Calin, Bica, who is joining us from the UK, from the Roma support group. Mihai is a campaigning and policy worker at the Roma support group, which is a charity, a Roma-led charity in the UK. So he will tell us about their work with EU citizens in the UK, and very interesting to hear about Brexit and all the details as well. So without further ado, Marina, I will pass you the floor. Thank you. We have another problem with the sound. Sorry. No. It was working earlier when we tried.
Is it better now?
Yes, much better.
Great. I hope it will stay like this. Okay, thank you so much, Sergio, from the first slide. Yes, thank you. So thank you so much again, Simona, for the introduction. In the next 15-20 minutes, I will be talking about some of the historical frameworks when it comes to Roma. And also because this today's session is about intersectionality and how marginalized communities face with homelessness, I will also talk about the situation of Roma women and the Roma LGBTI community as well. So when it comes to Roma, many people, you know, ask even the question that, okay, whom can we call Roma? Because Roma people are a very diverse communities in Europe. But usually, you know, in workshops and also in our everyday life, work life, we use the term of the Council of Europe, which says that the term Roma refers to Roma, Sinti, Calais, and related groups in Europe, including travelers and the Eastern European groups, such as the Dom and Lom, and covers the wide diversity of the groups and concerned, including persons who identify themselves as gypsies. So what you can see is that Roma is basically an umbrella term that we are referring to also not only Roma, but Sinti, Calais, and other groups as well. And what is also important to mention that even though Roma are very diverse groups. There are also the other groups which are many times associated with Roma people, but because of their historical differences and also because of the language they use, many times they are, people mix them with Roma people, such groups such as the Irish traveler community and also Danish people who live mostly in Scandinavia. Roma people and the Roma community is the biggest, largest minority in Europe. We have only estimated numbers because, when it comes to identifying as Roma people, many times we face with issues and also challenges when it comes to collecting data. So we have only estimated numbers, unfortunately, but it's about 10-12 million Roma living in Europe. And also, of course, we have Roma communities in the US, in Latin America as well, also in Asia. So we do not really know, unfortunately, the real numbers. Next slide, please. So when it comes to the migration of the Roma and the origins of Roma, for many, many years, for hundreds of years, we didn't really have like any research, any historical facts about it because, people, especially we didn't really have like Roma scholars, Roma academics, historians who could really invest in the migration of the Roma. However, in the 20th century, 21st century, we started to have more and more research and investigation in it. And of course, there are still many uncertainties, but the mostly accepted fact is that Roma people came and Roma people have an Indian origin. And it came because the historians and linguists were analyzing the Romani language. And they
Marina, sorry.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you. We cannot see the change in the slides. I don't know, Sergio.
Sergio, yeah.
Can you try to stop sharing and share again the screen, please, because it's not working. Okay.
Yeah, first slide. Thank you so much. Just let me know if it's not working. Okay. Okay. So as I said, linguists and also historians, they were comparing the Roma language with other Indian languages, and this is how they found out, or this is how they stated that Roma people most probably came from Central India, and they were most probably moved from Persia to Armenia to the Byzantine Empire to the Asia Minor and later on to Greece and to Europe. So you can also see that there are different waves of migrations as well. And you can see basically through the arrows that how Roma people from India went to the different countries as well. When it comes to the Romani language, linguists' methods make it possible to determine the spatial and temporal origin of an Indo-Aryan language. It has many features of the so-called Central Indo-Aryan languages, like these languages also like Hindu, Urdu, Punjabi, Gujarati, or the Rajasthani group. But it also shares features with Northern Indo-Aryan languages like Kashmiri. From this and other considerations, it has been concluded that the Roma's ancestors originally lived in Central India. The precise time when the Roma left India is unknown because, as I said, we don't have like written historical writings or documentations about it. But many historians who were trying to investigate in this issue, they said that most probably Roma people, the first arrivals of Roma people communities, they came in the 10th, 11th century. But as I said, it's still scientifically not so well supported. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in order to understand the today's situation of the Romani people and the Romani communities across Europe, we really also have to understand that what led to this contemporary situation. And in this issue, we also have to talk about the historical marginalization of the Roma over the centuries. Yeah, in this module, I am talking about the marginalization of the Roma in much more detail, but because my time is quite limited today, I just would like to focus on and highlight some of the historical happenings that led to the discrimination of Roma today. So I think until nowadays, many people, even in Romania, the majority population, they don't know that there was actually a slavery in Romania, which was abolished only in the mid-19th century. And, you know, when we talk about slavery, it's usually about what happened in the US with the Black American community, but we also have to acknowledge that maybe even before them, in Europe, we also practiced slavery, and Roma people were victims of it. So I think that's also very important to mention. And also when it comes to the Roma people's homelessness situation in Romania, to understand that there were like historical consequences and also you know, like happenings that led to the mass migration of Romania Roma people to the West, and also why they became homelessness. And it's very important to talk about it. When it comes to Spain, it's also important to mention that there were like forced assimilation processes and attempts and also laws in the 18th century. And also when it comes to the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Maria Theresia had different laws and also mechanism that she put in place to forcefully assimilate the Roma people, mostly in Hungary. And it went to an extent that Roma children were taken away from the Roma parents. You know, they couldn't practice the Roma language. So for instance, I come from the Romungro subgroup, and I don't speak Romanes as my mother tongue because, yeah, back in the history, it was completely banned. We have also different kind of migrations when it comes to the Roma people, and also in Europe. Maybe I will a little bit talk about that later. But what is also important to mention is that there are a lot of Holocaust denials until nowadays, not only when it comes to Jewish people, but also when it comes to Roma. So many people also don't know that the Poraimos, the Roma genocide of the Roma people, happened during the Second World War, which had a huge impact on the Roma population in Europe, not only by losing many Roma people, but also like how they started to feel after the war. Even when the war was over, you know, they didn't get any compensation for many years. It wasn't even in a discussion, you know, by Jewish people, for instance. Fortunately, they got compensations, and the process was much faster and much more grounded. While in the case of Roma, for many years, they didn't. The old Roma people, they didn't even want to talk about it because it was just so painful and so how to say. Yeah, it wasn't a subject that they wanted to bring up. You know, they just wanted to forget it. It was so severe and so painful for them. So that's very important also to talk about when it comes to the marginalization of the Roma over the centuries. When it comes to Roma women, it's also important to mention that there were also until just recently forced sterilization cases in Norway, Slovakia, Hungary, but we have many cases that were also taken to the European Court of Human Rights, but also in many other countries as well, which we maybe even don't know about. So Roma women, until nowadays, they face with huge discrimination in the healthcare system, and it mostly comes from racism. And what it meant is that, for instance, they weren't even notified when they visited the doctor that they will be sterilized, you know, and that just after many years, when they, for instance, they try to get pregnant, or they had some kind of disease or, you know, any other health conditions. They just realized that they were sterilized. Or there were cases when Roma women were threatened that their children will be taken away if they don't agree with forced sterilization, which wasn't an agreement because they had no other choice. So you can see also on the slide that there are so many other historical happenings that led to the marginalization of the Roma people. It's very important to educate ourselves as professionals working with homeless people, and also, you know, for the general public general public to educate ourselves on Roma history, even though it's most of the times you cannot find historical elements in the majority historical books. You know, Roma people, Roma children, they don't really learn about their own histories, which is still a huge issue. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in the last few minutes, I was just trying to focus on the historical background of the Roma people, although just very briefly, but it was very important to talk about the situation of the Roma today. So when it comes to the situation, many people and also policymakers, they usually bring up the topic of the education, because we all know, we all acknowledge that education is a really important part of our lives. However, when it comes to Roma children, they have limited access and limited opportunities to quality education. Most of the data and the research that we have on European level, it comes from the Fundamental Rights Agency report. And you can see on the slide from the 2019 Roma survey, you can see just a few data, which I would like to talk about today. So it was also found by the Fundamental Rights Agency that Roma children fall behind their non-Roma peers on all education indicators, which is a huge issue. There are only about half, 53% of Roma children between the age of 4 and starting at the age of compulsory primary education participate in early childhood education, which means that every second Roma children has no primary education, which you know, would help them to get better grades in the school, you know, to prepare them for the school environment, etc. So when it comes to also completing secondary education, it's only 50% again. The number of those people, primary education, the secondary education is only 20%. So you can see that there is a huge gap between the majority population and the Roma population. And also segregation in schooling is 61%, which is a great issue in many Eastern European countries. Most probably it happening also the West as well, but maybe we have less cases reported. So that's also a very great issue. Next slide, please.
Great. Marina, just to let you know that we have about 3 minutes left. I know there's a lot of things to say, but maybe if you can choose the most relevant ones, and to everyone, we will have the material available later.
Okay, I'm sorry. Then maybe I will just, you know, if you will get the PPT, then you will have all the information, all the numbers on the PPT. And I also encourage you to look at the FRA surveys. They are very active on carrying out research and data analysis on Roma. Then maybe I would go to the intersectional oppression in practice when it comes to Roma women. There is another slide on education. Yes, thank you so much. So I was also very glad to hear that there are so much work. There is so much work done on Roma women and homeless Roma women, because what we can see is that when it comes to specific groups, even within the Roma community, there are, like, for instance, Roma women, trans Roma women, gay Roma, lesbian, disabled Roma people who struggle even with more oppression and even with more discrimination than, for instance, their heterosexual Roma men peers or heterosexual women peers. So it's very important to provide them additional support and to understand their experiences, and according to their experiences to set up different measures. When it comes to the intersectional repression in practice, we can see that education, which later also contributes to the lack of education and quality education, which also later contributes to the increasing number of homelessness. We can see that Roma women and girls are far more behind than the Roma men and boy peers. So we can see that there is an unacceptably high number of early school leaving when it comes to Roma girls. It's like 71% according to the 2019 FRA data, which is really huge. So you can see that if you don't have a good education, if you drop out very early, then it's really hard to get a good employment, which eventually leads to homelessness as well. So we can see that Roma women and girls are highly affected by intersectional oppression and also in the future homelessness. What I would maybe a little bit talk about is the Roma LGBTI people. Thank you. So beside being a Roma woman, there are also other communities as well within the Roma communities which also suffer from intersectional oppression. As I mentioned, Roma LGBTI people belong to this group, and because of the patriarchal and heterosexual system which is maintained by the majority male population, it is really hard for them to get access to the basic needs. So they are very many times in precarious situation. They continuously face with harassment on the streets even, and also within the families, within the communities as well. So it's also very important to pay attention to their needs and to their experiences, because they are even more discriminated than heterosexual Roma people in general. You will see in the PPT the research and data that I could find. So when it comes to Roma LGBTI communities, we also face with the lack of data, and there are not so many institutions, human rights bodies who specifically focus on Roma LGBTI people. So it also makes our work very hard, because you know that in order to make and create effective policies, unfortunately or fortunately, we need supportive data. So their situation is really in making their situations better is really in early stages, because we are still suffering from lack of data. So it's very hard to work with this issue. I know that I don't have too much time. Maybe I miscalculated my presentation, but I hope that the historical overview, the brief historical overview, help you to understand the situation of Roma people within Europe, and also the marginalization that they face, and also the importance of learning about their history and experiences in order to understand their current situation, and also their current situation with homelessness, because they are interconnected. And I am happy to receive your questions later on. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marina. I think there's too many interesting things and too little time as usual, but we do have some time at the end for questions, so you can add to that. We will go straight to Mihai now, but thank you for making the connection with factors that can lead to homelessness, and it will be interesting to hear how Mihai works in the UK. Over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here today, and it was very interesting to hear from Marina. I'm sorry I couldn't join earlier to hear other people speaking. I'll start by saying a few things about us. So, as Simona mentioned, we are a London-based charity set up in 1998. By Roma families who at the time were in the UK seeking asylum, escaping from sort of communist countries from Central and Eastern European region. We are now mainly what we've been at that time as well, so a support and advice charity. This means that we help and we meet directly and we provide direct support to hundreds of Roma families every year. But we also do campaigns and policy-related work, and we assist professionals from across the UK in their own work with Roma. That includes supporting research, includes training, includes working alongside charities, alongside staff from local authorities or central authorities, to adapt their own services to be able to better respond to the needs of the Roma. Now, we are not a specialized sort of homeless or rough sleeping charity, but we obviously are sort of specialized in working with Roma, and that includes homeless Roma and rough sleeping, and those rough sleeping as well. Now, we've, for example, as I said, we're based in London, and our main sort of activities involving Roma who are on streets was and is related to those in London. And the sort of experience, the more relevant experience, which I like to share with you, starts from 2016, when our charity has been commissioned by a local authority in central London to run a research on rough sleeping Roma in central London. Of course, we've been assisting rough sleeping Roma before that occasionally, but obviously our support was limited to the kind of services that we were able to provide, you know, not being a specialized in assisting people sleeping rough. Now, through the research we've done in 2016, we've seen that the vast majority of Roma who sleep rough in central London are Romanian Roma. In fact, at that time, about 80% of London's rough sleeping people were Romanian nationals, and majority of those were Roma. We've met and spoke directly with 64 Roma during that research, and some of the kind of data we've identified at the time was includes, for example, and says that about 90% of those who we engage with reported that the UK, the London, has been their only migration experience. Well, 10% mentioned that they've been in other EU countries at the time. Also, 92% said that they had children back in Romania. And they all mentioned as a reason why they chose central areas to sleep. They've mentioned that they do so because of safety reason that they feel more safe in an area with a higher concentration of people, obviously with a lot of lights and lots of people circulating and so on. What also people have mentioned is that 87% of them said that there has been extremely limited engagement with the homeless or rough sleeping charities. And this is the sad bit here, because although the numbers were quite big, there was very limited engagement between the relevant sector and including the relevant authorities. Now, following this research, we've started campaigning on the rights of Roma sleeping rough in London, and this included, of course, approaching relevant charities and trying to assist them to adapt their own services so they can provide support to Roma as well, so we can get them off the streets. But this work also included approaching the Greater London Authority, including the mayor's rough sleeping team. And that work went over several years, I have to say, although we've produced a report on the back of the research which had very sort of well formulated recommendations, both for the charity sector, for Greater London Authority, for local councils in London, but also for the government. None of those recommendations were taken forward for a number of years. Now, despite us trying to influence the relevant people to do something about the increasing number of Roma on London streets, we've seen that the government has developed policies aiming to deport EU citizens sleeping rough, actually criminalizing them for the simple fact that they were seen sleeping on streets by authorities. Through that policies, we've seen hundreds of Roma being arrested and deported until December 2017, when this policy was declared unlawful by UK courts. Again, sadly, after that move, we've still have not seen the charity sector or the relevant public authorities taking measures to adapt their own services to respond to the needs of these people. Now, after that, we've seen that in 2019, the government launched the EU settlement scheme because of the Brexit, asking all EU citizens living in the UK to apply for a new immigration status so they can remain, they can live in the UK legally after the Brexit date. Now, with that scheme, we've seen that EU citizens sleeping rough were completely missed from outreach activities, and especially Roma, again, because services providing such support, information around EU settlement scheme, assistance around that, and so on. Again, those services were not adapted to meet the needs of Roma. So they did not employ staff from, for example, from the relevant nationality, let alone someone from the Roma background. And they were, and this meant that Roma missed a very, very long period, the missed opportunities to apply and to make applications to secure their status, so they can remain in the UK. Then, when a new Tory government led by Boris Johnson came in place, they've pledged to end rough sleeping in the UK by 2024. And they developed some policies in that sense. And we will see later where that took. But soon after that, the COVID-19 pandemic started. And the government has initiated the all-in policy, basically getting everyone off streets and placing people in hotels or various forms of accommodation. Now again, because there was no previous engagement with Roma and high levels of distrust between Roma and the services, again, many Roma did not access that accommodation and chose to leave the country before being offered the accommodation. And we've seen how various government and media reacted in various Central and Eastern European countries, how they reacted when Roma were returning to their countries of origin when the pandemic started. But that policy, the all-in policy, did provided a good opportunity for some Roma to get support, as suddenly we had everyone, from the streets placed in accommodation, mainly in hotels, and various charities started to outreach those people in those hotels and offer support to them. And of course, there was a lot of support available around EU settlement scheme. And those Roma who were placed, who accepted those offers and were in hotels, had opportunity to get support to apply for this immigration status. But we've seen that again, there was a missed opportunity with that because the sector again was not adapted to support Roma, and they rely heavily on Romanian volunteers to be able to provide that assistance. But it was indeed an opportunity, and some Roma did benefited for support while the all-in policy was in place. Then, after years of campaigning and us advocating and meeting people from the Mayor of London team, trying to influence them to develop some support for Roma sleeping rough, we've seen that in 2021, the Mayor has officially announced a program specially designed for Roma sleeping rough in London. And that program did took in consideration quite a few of the recommendations we had in the 2016 report. And that included providing assistance for professionals who work with homeless, rough sleeping Roma across London. The program also includes assisting Roma with getting accommodation, so getting off streets, sorting out immigration status, preparing people for employment, and assisting with other needs, such as helping people to apply for relevant benefits, and providing some support once people are accommodated. Now we've seen this program is already shows examples of success with numbers of Roma being already accommodated, with many of them having already sorted their immigration status, sorted their benefits, starting employment as well, and it shows that it's a positive program. Of course, there is a lot of work that needs to be done for that to happen, and it's a long process, but it already has it's already demonstrating success. Now, us as a service, as I said, we're not specialized in assisting rough sleeping, but we do help homeless people. And once, for example, people are accommodated, we then provide a sort of wraparound support to those who access it from us. And that included, obviously, providing information, assistance to people to sort out their contracts, for example, with utilities, energy providers, and so on, assisting with benefits, explaining rights as a tenant and obligations, and so on, because we're seeing that there is quite a lot of work. So once people are accommodated, there is a huge need of work to be done to make sure that those people do understand the new context they live in, their obligations, their duties, how they have to go about, around setting up their own sort of bills and so on, how they have to go about bringing new family members over from Romania to live with them, and so on. So we think that at the moment this program has a huge potential to show a positive and to become a positive example for other parts of Europe, as it has all the sort of elements needed. It employs a team of several Roma individuals with a lot of experience helping Roma. It works with local authorities from across London, and also works well with Greater London Authority to be able to identify additional support that these people need. And I think that would conclude my presentation, as I know we're running late. So I don't know if there will be time for questions, I'm very happy to take any. Thanks.
Yes, thank you so much, Mihai. It's really hard for me to stop you because it's really interesting to hear from you, but also we have to take some questions, hopefully. So we have 10 minutes now. I would like to invite everyone again to write in the chat or raise your hand. And while you do that, maybe I can get us started with a question, and coming back to you, Marina. Thinking about the presentations in the first session, where we already heard our colleagues mentioning Roma women and issues related to accommodation. Can you reflect a bit on that? Do you have anything to add when it comes to tools that organizations can implement to make sure that they better answer to the needs of people with Roma background, or to anything that it was mentioned earlier? Can't hear you again. Not very clear. Yeah, I think you need to do the magic you did earlier. Mihai, that goes for you as well.
I think it's better now.
Yes. Yes.
Sorry, I seemingly have some problems in my laptop. Okay. So it was very nice to hear actually when Carmen was talking about not losing one's identity just because you would like to integrate. I don't like to even use the word integration, because that also means that somehow you have to give up your identities. I would better use inclusion. So I think that's a very important element when it comes to Roma women, especially for those who come from maybe a more traditional background, who speak Roman as their mother tongue, who are very much connected with their Roma roots. So I think that is a very important element to nurture Roma identity and the Roma women's, and also as a women identity, besides providing them with the necessary services. And yeah, just even to listen to women in general, I think is very much lacking in institutions and in organizations. So I think as a first step to create a safe environment where Roma women are able to, and also encouraged to talk about their problems, which can be many times very personal and also very painful, because at the same time they face with sexism and racism, and in terms of the situation of Roma trans women, bisexual, lesbian women. So, there are more elements that come to play in their vulnerability. So I think listening to them and with an open heart and an open mind, and also educating yourself, as I mentioned, about Roma history and their marginalization is also very important, because as I said, even Roma women, themselves, they don't know about their their own histories, you know, where the Roma women's movement and why it is so important for them to participate in public or political life. So educating yourself as a non-Roma professional, but also as a Roma professional working with the homeless Roma women and LGBTI people, that's the first thing that I would say. Creating a safe space for them for sharing and nurturing Roma identity beside including them in health services. Thank you.
Thank you, Marina. I was saying, Mihai, that the same question would go to you as well, because you already mentioned that yourselves are not a homelessness specific service, but you have worked in this field in the past years. And what are your reflections from interacting with the sector?
Can you be more specific? What sector? I mean, the sector who specialized on
sector. Sorry.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. Well, I have to say that it's quite challenging from my experience. Why? Because I don't know. Obviously, I speak in the case of London and the UK. The rough sleeping sector in the UK is developed and designed to work mostly with and provide assistance to people sleeping rough around drug addiction, alcohol addiction, and mental health issues. While in the case of Roma, this is completely different. We see very little drug use, very little alcohol use, and so on, and mental health illnesses and issues within the rough sleeping Roma population. And so the rough sleeping sector in London, for example, again, was not adapted to provide support to Roma from that sense, and they were not understanding why Roma are not picking up their offer. Then apart from that, the sector does not have the right skills, mainly the language. So we've seen recently, just in the last, maybe a year or so, that some charities have made efforts at least to recruit volunteers who speak relevant languages, but they are still due to employ staff, to train that staff, or to train the existing staff into the community that they really want to work with. And as we've seen from the numbers, the Roma who are on streets in London are quite significant in terms of numbers. So yeah, it's been quite challenging for us to try to convince the sector that actually they need to develop new services, basically provide employment assistance, provide wrap around, I don't know, support with benefits, try to get people off streets by getting them into employment, and helping them once they are accommodating, so providing ongoing support after they're accommodating, and so on.
Thank you for highlighting that. I see 2 hands already raised, so I will open the floor now for Edina Alfred. If you can hear us and unmute yourself.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I'm from the organization Räddningsmissionen in Gothenburg, Sweden, and work as a social worker at the Center for Undocumented and EU Migrants. And I was wondering, because now here they're going to make statistics for all the rough sleepers, but undocumented and EU migrants are not included. So I wanted to ask a question in London: how does the statistics for Roma rough sleepers and EU migrants and so on, are there any statistics of that?
Yeah, there are in London. So the Greater London Authority counts people regularly who are on streets. So there are various local councils within London have specialized rough sleeping outreach teams, which go regularly on street and count people. And then all that count goes into a report, which is publicly available, and that report is published every year, and it includes numbers of total numbers of rough sleepers. It includes nationalities, and also it includes numbers on Roma, where obviously people disclose that, or people for example, we see in areas where there is a higher engagement with Roma, where there is a trusted relationship, there are greater numbers. So in some areas, people don't want to say that they're Roma and so on, but that's how they go about it. There is also a public system whereby everyone, members of the public and so on, can report a new person seen sleeping rough. The system is called StreetLink. It's online. There is an app as well, and so on. So people can go online and say, "I've just seen a new person sleeping rough," and they pin the location on a map, and then an outreach team will go and see that person. And if they will be confirmed as sleeping rough, they will then be included in that database. Yeah.
Thank you for that. We are a bit late, but I will kindly ask everyone to stay with us for 5 more minutes, because we have 2 more hands raised, and I would like to hear from people as well. So Bianca, we can go over to you.
A very short reflection on about what Mihai was saying about the things that you are often observing, the fact that the services were not adapted to the needs that the people have, and a short reflection on what we often think happens in Norway. It is a form of welfare bordering, which maybe sometimes shows the lack of willingness from politicians, or which in practice for our mobile destitute migrants actually means it is a form for immigration policy, right? It is a form of bordering access to some rights.
Yes, I agree. Indeed, it's very much connected to the political will around this. And in fact, we've seen that some of the organizations in the rough sleeping sector in the UK were actually collaborating with the government and basically helping the government to deport EU citizens sleeping rough. And that information was, made public. And some of those organizations apologized for that. So yeah, indeed, thanks.
Thank you both for those reflections. And just to say that this topic is also interesting for us at FEANTSA, so we continue to raise awareness on these issues. So thank you once again for joining us today to help with that. We have Raquel Iglesias. Raquel, if you can hear us, can you unmute yourself and come in? I'm not sure you were with us still. Raquel, we cannot hear you. Okay, you don't need to intervene. I think that it's about time that we wrap up. Thanks to everyone for joining. Thank you to our speakers today. It was very interesting to hear from you. Thank you for the contributions from the audience. And final points for me would be that there are still subjects to be debated, so we will continue to organize webinars and discussions. Like I said earlier, tomorrow we are addressing possibilities of funding for supporting mobile EU citizens in destitution and homelessness, so make sure to register if you haven't yet. So besides thanking everyone, I think we leave today with many important things. We see lots of commonalities between the 2 sessions as well. So I hope this was useful and helpful. And yeah, we look forward to hear more from you as well. So feel free to get in touch. Write to us if you want us to address a different topic in the future, or if you want to share about the work that you are doing with people experiencing homelessness and EU citizens in particular. And of course, we will make the recording available. And like I mentioned previously, Marina has prepared some modules for us concerning Roma history and culture. So we will promote those as well and share with everyone. Thank you so much. Have a nice afternoon.